And another night's upon us. Banks and shops under attack, and this is far from Ferguson. Are these protests over police now over the top? Welcome, everybody. I'm Neil Cavuto, and police in Berkeley, California, bracing for a third night of violence. Protesters smashing up windows, looting stores. At Macy's in New York City, hundreds of demonstrators shouting, "Shut it down." The group staging what they call a die-in on the main floor of the flagship store, disrupting a lot of holiday shopping. The Fox Business Network's Charles Payne, who says enough with the business bashing, but Catherine Ruetschlin says many of these protesters are onto something. How so, Catherine?
Well, you know, there's a long history of civil rights embedded in economic justice movement. It's from before Martin Luther King held the Poor People's March, all the way back to the very ideals of our country. If we want to live in a country where everyone has an equal say in their democracy and an equal chance in their economy, we really have to take complaints like this seriously.
What about people who just want to shop?
Well, people who want to shop have been doing a great job at it, and I'm all for that. But it's important for people to take a moment out of their daily lives to recognize when there's a real problem with the economic and political system. And it's our obligation as Americans to call out those failures.
Is this the way to do it, Charles?
I'd say absolutely not. And I think it's orchestrated. There's the same gigantic liberal umbrella progressive, some very rich people, by the way, pulling the strings here. I don't think Walmart is the reason for police brutality. I can't connect those
But they're
dots.
even doing it at Apple stores.
Apple stores. I read a piece about Bill Gates, how he made his money through prisons and slavery. I mean, it gets crazy out of hand, and it's like the opportunities for some people to go and buy on Black Friday when they should have been shopping for discounts. They said, no, don't go out. How can rich people tell poor black people, don't shop on the cheapest shopping day of the year? Show them that you mean business. I mean, it's so ass backwards, the whole thing.
Well, I'm for anyone's right to protest. I draw the line when you interfere with others' rights to do what they want to do, you know?
In a thriving democracy, it's the people who set the rules for the economy. And right now, the vast majority of American people don't feel like the economy is serving their families or serving their communities.
They should be protesting the White House.
It's particularly cute.
Not Macy's, not the company that hired 65,000 people for the holidays.
In fact, we've seen a real racial bias in very powerful economic institutions like the big banks that targeted black communities
or
for
like
subprime
liberal
lending.
organizations like Silicon Valley with 2% blacks, and that's only the black woman at the reception desk. Or how about the Sony leak with one black executive? Yeah, all these bastions of liberalism where they love black people. They'll make a movie about slaves or butlers, but they'd never hire a black person for a real job. Did any liberal offer Eric Garner a job? No, you protest his death, but you'd never give him a job.
But Catherine, how did this meld from last week protests over the fairness or unfairness of a grand jury non-indictment?
Well, I think that people really are linking these issues as a matter of basic human dignity. And it's really about how we're treated by institutions of law, how we're treated by economic institutions.
But how is disrupting traffic at an Apple store? Apple, very friendly to a lot of these same causes. The same as protesting police brutality?
Well, of course, the idea of speaking politically in the public sphere is to both broadcast your message to audiences and to bring it home.
Do you find it a tad ironic that they're texting in an Apple store on Apple iPhones?
That is quite rich, yes.
It is, right?
You know, here's the funny thing. Even Saturday Night Live had a skit, the first coming out the gate, about the idea that blocking traffic, people trying to get home after a long day of work at the tunnel or the bridge, is really going to, you know, like that's the Dale Carnegie School of getting people on your side. It's ridiculous.
But to her point, that has been the long history of protests in this country, to be disruptive.
Private on streets, but going inside of someone's business, going inside of a Macy's or an Apple store, I don't even get it, except that I think that there are people who would love to link the idea of America, the exceptionalism, capitalism, freedom. For them, they hate the whole kit and caboodle. And if they can use a death, how are they honoring anyone who's died?
See, that's what I think could be going on, Catherine. It worries me that this has become a glom-on cause, that everyone just attaches, everyone that they Occupy Wall Street is to everyone else, that and they all put under the same umbrella.
Well, we know that the civil rights movement and the labor movement in the 1960s stood together on those lines when they talked about human dignity. And in this case, we are looking at a movement of people who have an unfinished business since the 1960s.
Why don't they raise it in Washington, where it's the government that has intruded on these businesses and their ability to hire, rather than on the businesses themselves?
In many cases, this has been brought up in Washington, and we've seen some attention to it. But the real way to get the message out there, to get a real change happening, is to keep it in people's day-to-day conversations.
No, you keep it
in
in Washington's day-to-day conversation. But you're going after the wrong message and the wrong messenger.
Well, I do think that several of these business institutions have a grand degree of power over people's economic outcomes. Things like the banks that racially profiled their subprime lending market, and that is still an outcome that we're feeling in our pockets today.
What about the progressive tax policy of the liberals and progressives who I think I call it the sin of sin taxes. The taxes on cigarettes are so amazing. You guys have kept so many black poor people poor. You know, if I buy 10 packs of cigarettes a day in New York City, after 18 years, that's $120,000. I can't send my kids to school if I smoke, and it's because of those. Then you tax gasoline. You're sin tax. You want to tax a soda. You want to tax a Slurpee. Those are sin taxes that hold back the poorest, least educated people in America.
You know, this is very linked to my point, because we want to believe that the people who make decisions about our taxes, about where our money goes, are acting in our best interest.
That's not Apple.
And we have seen over the last several election cycles that more and more it's big money players that are influencing politics. Walmart spending, $30 million
Macy's is hiring
on the last
50 or
election.
65,000 people for the holidays. Black, white, everyone in between. What's wrong with that?
I think
You're disrupting their ability to make money, those people to make money.
I think new hiring is central to economic progress and a thriving middle class.
But you're almost making it sound like they're keeping them chained to these registers. These stores, evil as they are in your eyes, are providing opportunities to the very people who are now being disrupted by lions, die-ins, shut-ins, you name it.
Access to employment is very important. The quality of those jobs is also very important.
You're not giving them the access. You're not giving them the access.
Let's face it, though. I mean, really, the focus should be, if you really want to change my life, I mean, I appreciate you going out and protesting police brutality. Make the education system better. Open up more doors to these elite places where they're closed. Not Walmarts where they're open. There's some places out there, but help us out in other areas where we really can change
and address
our lives.
the trillions spent fighting a war on poverty that we're still losing.
I think that it's great that you guys have linked these two additional issues to the protests surrounding Ferguson. But
no, you linked these protests going on to the businesses to it, and I thought it was silly.
I think these are all primary factors in people's day-to-day life, and having a conversation about them in the public sphere is the real meaning of democracy.
A dying
and
is not a conversation.
Great.
Blocking the Lincoln Tunnel for 4 hours is not a conversation.
Lots of people trying to get home.
Well, we're talking about it.
Yeah. Yes, indeed we are. Indeed we are. Catherine, I want to thank you. Charles, I want to thank you. By the way, remember